what our head tells us to do. And he goes on to talk about the various members of the body. If the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I'm not a part of the body, it is not for this reason any less a part of the body. Which one of you would rather give up a foot or a hand? Wouldn't you rather not have to be put in a position to do either one? We need them both. God so composed the body that it works together. And all the parts have a function. Ear, nose, eyes, tongue, fingers, toes. All of them have a function. Now, a very simple illustration that every one of us understands. And then he goes on to say, if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. This is verse 26. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. He's talking about the physical body there. Is it not true? Anybody ever stub their toe or hit their finger with a hammer or some such thing? Which part of your body hurts? Well, that one hurts the most, but every other part of your body sympathizes with it. And all this simple illustration that we can all understand, Paul says, this is the reason I'm telling you this. Verse 27, now you are Christ's body and individually members of it. I hope they got the point. And I hope we get the point. Because that's what the whole point is about this lesson, is that we're all part of each other. And we'll talk about that just a little bit more. But you can understand how part of your body hurting should cause the rest of you to hurt. We have members of our congregation that are hurting. We have members of our congregation that say, let me ask you, and I'm not looking for show of hands. Does that bother you? Are you concerned? Are you praying for them? Are you using these wonderful opportunities we have to help the sick? Or, well, I'll say a short prayer for them and then forget them. Because they really aren't part of your body, are they? They're really not close to you. Sadly, you may not even know them. You just know who they are by their name. After telling him all these things, Paul then decides to give the final, ultimate lesson to them. He starts in verse 1 of chapter 13 that speaking in tongues is nothing. It is a use God has given to people in those days so that then they could be able to spread the gospel to people that didn't speak that language. Prophesying, all of those things, they only had a purpose of edifying the body or honoring Christ by teaching other people. He says they're nothing. And if I had all of these things, it would be nothing more than a clanging cymbal, because there's one thing that we're lacking, and there's one thing that is fully important that we have to have. In verses 4 and 5, and I'm not going to use all the verses, but just verses 4 and 5 will tell us how to solve all of his problems. Love is patient. Okay? Am I patient? Love is kind. Am I concerned about being kind to people? Love is not jealous. Remember we talked about part of the problem there was jealousy. Love does not brag. It's not arrogant. Another problem they had there was arrogance. It does not act unbecomingly. We always should remember every day of our lives, not when we're sitting here in assembly, when we get out there in the world, those people have nothing to judge Jesus Christ by but our lives. Now think about your last week. What would people think about Jesus Christ from how you've been this week? Been yelling and screaming at people that when you ordered something and it didn't come in right and you're down talking to the clerk? You go out to dinner and somebody didn't get it right and you jumped on the server, who of course didn't have anything to do with it. Is that honoring Jesus Christ? Do any of us get the idea that getting our own way about something, that getting revenge about something, is even remotely close to being what Jesus Christ wants us to be? It doesn't seek its own way. The New International says that's a good translation. It does not seek its own way. The people in Corinth were seeking their own way. I want it done my way. It's my way or the highway, in other words, and people have that attitude. Is not provoked. Can you imagine what peace you would have in a congregation where people didn't get provoked? I heard you say something. Were you talking about me? Well, what if they were, or what if they weren't? I'm provoked. Does not take into account a wrong suffered. Wow. You've all heard the old story, it takes two to fight. That's still a good theme. I guess there could be a bully and somebody that refuses to fight and get beat up. After all, they did kill Christ, and they did stone Paul, and they did finally cut his head off. But the basic premise is right, and it certainly should be right among Christians. One person is upset. What do we do when somebody yells at us? What's the first thing we think about doing? Now, be honest with yourself. Somebody yells at me, I want to yell back, don't you? Don't. What's going to happen when somebody's yelling at you and you're just quiet? And when they stop yelling, then say, if you think I've offended you, I'm sorry about that. Well, of course, then you're getting rid of your pride, and most people they can't stand that. Humility is something that Americans think is ugly. It's Jesus Christ, of course, and most Americans may think he's ugly. I don't know. But what happens if we do that? If we don't yell back, if we don't fuss back, you call me a name, and I absolutely don't call you a name. Well, we're being like Jesus Christ. We're being like our Lord. We're being like mature Christian adults that want to go to heaven. Not little children that says, taking my ball and leaving. I want you to think of this one thing, and I know if you've ever had brothers or sisters, you understand this. I used to fight with my brother all the time. I mean, physically fight. I used to yell at him, and he yelled at me. I'm not suggesting any of that's right, and certainly not for Christians, but I am telling you this. You understand that a brother or sister that you fuss and fight with is still your brother and sister, and you still love them. You might not love them right then when you're fussing and fighting with them, but you don't leave the family because of it. You don't take your toys and run off. What do? You get over it. Now, with Christians, I would hope when we have these situations that somebody would apologize and somebody would ask forgiveness. But even if they don't, at least treat your brothers and sisters like you treat your own family. Because, in fact, they are your family and more important to you than your own family. If you don't understand that, you have not grown up yet enough to be a Christian. My physical family, as much as I love them, is not as important as my spiritual family. Thankfully, most of my physical family are my spiritual family. I don't have to make that choice. But people had to make the choice in New Testament times between their physical family and the Lord. But at least treat the family of God the way you treat your own family. I didn't ever think about my brother having to come apologize to me because we got in a fight. He didn't either. In fact, we would have probably been surprised if the other one had done it. What's that about? I forgot about that already. It usually takes you a day or two to get over things with your brothers and sisters in your flesh. So why in the world can't we be like that with our brothers and sisters spiritually? Because we're still in the flesh, Paul says, and we have not grown spiritually enough to understand what our Lord requires of us.